You're listening to the 49 Carats Podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats Podcast. I'm your host, Steph. It is Monday, January 8th. The 49ers have officially set their eyes on their next game. The regular season is out of the way. But me and Weston here, we're going to look back on this Week 18 game one last time to acknowledge some notable performances and just some questions, discussions that we have on some of them. So Weston, welcome. Thanks for joining me once again on a Monday, as you always do. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Steph. I'm just eager for playoff football to begin, especially considering what I think we saw kind of across the league, yesterday, not just with the 49ers, just a lot of teams were like locked into position. A few games had a ton of relevancy. I'd liken it to just watching JV squads versus varsity squads, but I'm excited to watch a wild card weekend with not having to cheer for my team and get a little break and see how the chips fall and who we're going to be, matched up against. But 18 weeks ago, this was always the goal, right? So phase one accomplished, and now it's time to get serious and move forward.
Yeah, exactly. And this Week 18 game felt like more of a formality than anything. Like, let's just get out of here and finish this game. Let's not deal with any injuries. Now, we figured that starters were going to play, at least some of them, because it's mathematically impossible to rest all of them, right?
Totally.
So what I have up on the screen is just some of the players who started, who aren't the usual starters in this game. So Sam Darnold, of course, started at quarterback. Elijah Mitchell was the running back. Tight end Charlie Warner, Oren Burks, linebacker. Isaiah Oliver started as a nickel corner. We had Taylor Hawkins start at safety, as well as Logan Ryan. So some unfamiliar faces for a lot of us, at least throughout the year. But you do see some of the usual starters who started this game as well, like Trent Williams, Nick Bosa, right? Fred, Ayuk, Debo. How did you feel about the way that Kyle kind of divvied up the snaps? A lot of those guys, like I said, started the game, but they were pulled pretty early. How do you feel like Kyle towed that line between rest and rust?
Rest and rust. I think he did the best he could with, with the cards that were dealt to him. I think he would have, if you were to ask him, he probably would have preferred to not even have Trent put pads on, not even have Nick put pads on, but there's a lot of people that were on the inactive list that are part of the ongoing injury problem for the 49ers that count against the numbers, right? Like, look at on your screen right now with Hawkins and Ryan. That's because Gibson and Brown are out, like flat out, right? From an injury perspective, you got Jawan you can add to that list and keep on going. So the numbers dictated that, these players had to play. I think he did the best he could to get them out of the game. Steph, look how he was handcuffed. George Kittle was part of the active roster for the game.
Yeah.
And dude didn't even have pads on, right? Like he was on the sidelines. I'm like, hopefully we don't need a third tight end, because he's going to have to run back into the locker room and get dressed. He did the best he could. I'm happy with how it shook out, because I just don't think, the relevant people that we probably would all agree, like, hey, if you're going to be in a situation to rest, that you'd want them to rest. They pretty much got rest, but they got the ability to warm up, right? Go through their pregame routines, put pad on pad, even if it was just for a couple snaps. So this week really wasn't a week off, and now you're just getting those guys into a traditional. I think you put it best, Steph. You had a tweet where you mentioned Debo feels like the kind of guy that you just want to have out there. And I don't mean to like call you out on that. I agreed with it wholeheartedly. Some of these guys are rhythm players, especially the more physical ones. Like they need to see action, even if it's limited. He did the best he could. He would like to have done things a little differently. Just the numbers say he can't.
Yeah, I was fine with it too. I think Nick Bosa might have been the one who stayed there the longest as far as the starters go. I think right before the half is when he started to
Yeah.
kind of dwindle out. And 49ers all in all were fortunate that no injuries took place because we all know how that discourse would have kind of panned out.
Yeah.
Uh, but other teams around the league not so lucky in week 18. We saw the Eagles playing against the Giants. AJ Brown dealing with a knee injury now. I think we're still waiting on some more information on that. But that didn't look good. And then Jalen Hurts, had his finger
Yep.
in a not so normal position there. Sam Laporta of the Lions, their tight end, he is. I think they're still gathering information on him, but around the league, some playoff teams not so fortunate. So the 49ers, of course, escape this week 18 game with just the Clinton Farrell injury, who we saw him leave the game pretty early and he was declared out pretty quickly as well. But it seems like there's optimism that he's going to be fine when the 49ers take the field again for their divisional game. Now, what I did want to talk about is just some of the performances of these guys that, played more snaps than the usual amount in this week 18 game. We had Sam Darnold, starting this game. What did you think of Sam Darnold's performance in this one? I personally didn't think it was too shabby.
Yeah, I thought I was going to be in, the minority on this one, Steph, where I just felt like he looked good, right? I mean, given the circumstances, yes, he had some of his offensive weapons, right? The Avengers out there with him that's always going to help and aid and make things look a little bit better against, the Rams D, whatever. I mean, everything that we knew about Stan was on display. Like, we know he's got a big time arm. We know he can sling the rock. We can do all of that. I loved his feistiness and scrambling for some first downs and doing those things. Felt like he had pretty good pocket awareness. I thought the first half looked really, really, really good. Second half didn't look as great, but I don't think that's necessarily Sam Darnold's fault either. I mean, you talk about 3 big drops, right? Like at the end of the game there, or 2 big drops at the end of the game that were big time positions. And I just think the 49ers did a really good job in the first, not to make this about the game, that's about Sam Darnold, but they did a really good job in the first half of controlling the clock and going in 27. It just flipped in the second half. Then the Rams did a really good job of possessing the ball and controlling the clock. So he got fewer opportunities. I think Kyle was worried about the scoreboard because he never wants to lose to his buddy McVay, but like at the end of the day, they know there was no real impact there. And I think the play call just got a little vanilla at the end. That's it. Just a little vanilla at the end. And, but all in all, I thought it was a good performance he put on tape. Good for him. More importantly, to get if the ghosts of playoff past come creeping up to us, you'd rather have that quarterback get some reps, right, of before just being thrusted out there. So not bad at all. I thought he played well.
Yeah, as Alan says, we're in trouble if he has to start. That's fair. Totally fair. That's not usually a good sign for any team, quite frankly, if their backup has to go in there. But I was very encouraged by the first half, especially the first 2 drives where the 49ers pretty much marched down the field, 75 yards for both of those. As you said, they were eating the clock up, so that was good. And you got to remember, in those first 2 drives, he had Brandon Ayuk, he had Debo, he had the usual offensive linemen, offensive starters, aside from McCaffrey, George Kittle. So assuming that let's just say if he, worst comes to worst, and he did have to go out there, he would likely have all of the offensive starters available to him, which, as we know, could help any quarterback. But I didn't think it was too bad for Sam Darnold. He finished 16 of 26. That's good for a 61.5 completion percentage, 189 yards passing, 1 touchdown. He also added 5 runs for 18 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. And yeah, you mentioned the drops. Those were pretty big, and a lot of those did happen in the second half, if not all of them. Yeah. If I'm remembering correctly, one in McLeod, one Chris Conley, and then another to Ronnie Bell, which wasn't a drop, but that was a miscommunication, obviously, on Ronnie Bell's part. Probably, you could say that'd be a first down if they're on the same page there. But I didn't think it was too bad of a day for him. I know he had the 2 fumbles, but one was when he lost, of course, at the end of the game. The other would just seem like a bad snap, but all in all, not bad. I'm just curious to see what happens with Sam Darnold after this year. I mean, maybe the 49ers were doing him a favor as well, getting him some opportunity for the offseason, right? And showcasing him for prospective teams for next year. Although I don't know if he'll ever be much more than a backup going forward, but still okay to see him. Now, on Elijah Mitchell, let's get into Elijah Mitchell, man, because he had more carries than I was expecting him to have in this game, and I don't know what to make of that. He had 14 carries, 52 yards, and a touchdown. I thought this was going to be the game that we were going to see, like Jordan Mason Hive was going to be buzzing, I thought, after the Week 18 game. Yep. And if you look at Jordan Mason's numbers, like he only got 6 carries, but he averaged 6 yards every time. So, like, I feel like he would have probably been on his way to having one of those games, but just didn't get that opportunity. What do you think the split of the workload between those two tells us about how the team feels about him and, maybe Mitchell's involvement in the future?
Yeah, this is pure conjecture on my part, Steph. I don't think it has, again, my opinion, I don't think it has much to do with who's in favor, who's out of favor. I think Jordan Mason has done everything that he's supposed to do and everything he's been asked to do, and he runs the ball hard. When I'm surprised, because I, like you and many others, thought this had JP Mason written all over it for the game, especially since Mitchell's been back. He's clearly been the number 2 back, right? So, like, you're trying to preserve your depth. I can't help but wonder, was part of this Kyle saying, like, because Mitchell has been so injury prone, to be like, I need to see how he stands up after 15 touches in a game, because maybe we have to call upon him that way. I don't know. Maybe there's if the pendulum's swinging anyway, maybe there's a little bit loss in confidence in Mitchell and what his production might entail, and, try to knock whatever rust off, from limited action this entire year. I mean, last week was the most we saw of him all season, right? So I don't know what to make of it. I think if I'm the play caller, right, and I'm dishing out assignments, I'm thinking 24 is getting more totes than 25 this game, but right. I don't know the rhyme or reason behind it. But I still thought, as explosive as Mason looked in his few carries, I still thought Elijah, like, he runs really hard for not a big guy, and he always is falling forward. And if Kyle's goal was to accomplish getting him hit a couple times and seeing if he can withstand that for the playoff push, like, we'll see what the injury report looks like Wednesday or Thursday, if there's anything lingering. But that being said, like, mission accomplished. I thought he still ran hard. But I think we would have probably saw more of Mason if the Rams didn't control the time of possession in the second half, if we're being clear about it.
That is fair. Although, like, the way that it kind of shook out, so it was Elijah Mitchell, as I said, started the game. Then Jordan Mason got like a series. And so I was like, okay, like, cool. Like, this is the point in the game where it's Jordan Mason here on out, just like preseason kind of thing. And then Elijah Mitchell, the next series, is out there again. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, we're doing this. And then that's kind of just how it was for the rest of the game. Like, mixing those two guys in, but Elijah Mitchell, like I said, seemed to just get more of the carries. Now, I know we've mentioned in the past that Mitchell's very much a rhythm rusher, right? So maybe that's kind of what this is. And maybe it's a sign that Elijah Mitchell will be involved for the playoffs. He spent much of the regular season dealing with some injuries, in and out of the lineup, but mostly out, for the most part. And so now you have him healthy, and he clearly does look healthy the way he's running right now. I mean, the 49ers have an opportunity to make this a 1A, 1B kind of thing. And when we have seen both McCaffrey and Mitchell healthy together on the field, it's been a pretty effective 1-2 punch. So I got to wonder if that's what they have in the back of their minds going into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think because Mitchell has showed his physicality in his running style, the obvious statement of the day is whoever the 49ers play, they've already played an extra game. Maybe that game goes to overtime. Maybe that team's defense is on the field for a long time. Like whatever it might be, whoever gets by. And now they got to come to San Francisco. And if you commit to 40 carries, you know what I mean? Because that's going to be your formula to win the game. You don't want Christian McCaffrey touching the ball 40 times. And they are different runners, right? Like Christian McCaffrey, he's explosive through the hole. He doesn't dance around much, but he's patient, right? Like where he'll find his hole, he'll squeeze. Mitchell's just going to run right into the back of the offensive lineman and just keep going forward. And that's different preparation. And now Kyle just put one more thing on tape. What if 25 is going to get reps and they got a short week to game plan for that? I don't know. Like this game, this profession is so full of like head games and cat and mouse that would you be shocked at all if that was like his game plan whatsoever? Like, hey, week 1, I know everybody thinks we're slinging this ball with Brock, an MVP candidate, blah, blah, blah. False. We're going to go right back to the 49ers of old and we're going to hand the ball off 40 times.
Right. And so something in the back of my mind too is that 2019 team that had the, first round bye week. They were the 1 seed, right? In the NFC. And they came out of their bye week in all their playoff games, running the football.
No doubt.
And, a slightly different identity then than they have now. They've gotten more comfortable with, passing the ball as of late. Brock Purdy, you have no trust issues with him. But I kind of I'm kind of wondering if they're kind of teeing up a run heavier approach, even more so than we've seen this season, even more so. Because I also think that can maybe help alleviate the risk of rust and all this like fear that we have, right? Because I know Christian McCaffrey is going to come out and that guy's not going to have, that guy is not going to have rust. Like he's the one player.
He's in the gym right now, Steph.
Probably. Yeah. He's the one player I would never worry about being rusty or just having that like mental rust even. Not worried about him. So I think you come into that game, whoever you're playing in that divisional game, and you plan to run the football. That's how you start the game. If it works, great. If you can, build stuff off of that, even better, right? But I think that they could go into that game, that being the plan, and having the 1-2 punch, it could just help that transition into getting back into the swing of things that much easier. So I know, just something in the back of my mind. It wouldn't be a bad idea if they decided that.
That's winning formula in playoffs, right?
Yeah.
Run the ball, play defense. It's simple, But what do we know, right? That now watch that we just said this. Kyle's going to come out and Brock's going to throw 40 times in the divisional round.
Yeah, I know, because Kyle's watching this and he's like, "All right, bet."
He should be watching it. Like, hey, these guys are on to something.
Right? Yeah, that's what I think. But all right, yeah, Elijah Mitchell. I do expect him to get more opportunity in the playoffs. Excited to see what that looks like with the 1-2 punch. Now let's turn over to the defense a little bit. We saw Isaiah Oliver start this game at slot corner. He was one of 3 defenders that played all of the defensive snaps in this game. He had 10 total tackles. I do have to say, and this isn't like news or anything, but he's just so much of a better tackler in space, like on the outside, than he is like in coverage. PFF did notch him with 2 missed tackles, so I guess I got to mention that too. But it just felt like he was in on a lot of tackles. He had 4 stops. He allowed all six of his targets to be caught, but only 29 yards total. For the purpose of a meaningless game in week 18 of the regular season, it's fine. Fine. Serviceable. Yep. But let's just hope that Ambry Thomas and Diamador Lenore can stay healthy. So we don't have to see him in a playoff game. Like it's not that he had a bad game. It's just that I don't want to see it. Respectfully.
So he did not have a bad game. Let's be very clear, right? But let's also be clear about the competition in which he was facing. Carson Wentz versus Matthew Stafford. No Cooper Kupp, no Tyler Higbee, right? Like just the people that this offense gets really. The only reason why Nakua was even out there was to force the initiative around setting the rookie records. Otherwise, they probably would have found a way to sit him as well for what he's contributed to this offense. But all that aside, you can only play who the other team puts out there, and Isaiah Oliver did what he was asked to do. But I cannot overstress enough the importance of what you just said of like, if we are reliant upon him come playoff football, that's not a good spot for us to be. And that's not a spot that we've been in many, many, many weeks since the emergence of Ambry Thomas to complement what Demo and Ward have been doing out there right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so hopefully we don't have to see it. And that's like on top of it just being a very unfortunate thing for Jason Verrett, like the fact that the 49ers have one less piece of depth at corner is another blow. But yeah, hopefully the top three guys can stay healthy, and we don't have to see the rest at least until training camp of next year, right?
Totally.
As far as the linebackers go, though, I was pleasantly, surprised with the way Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles played. He had 10 tackles, 3 of them for loss. He was very active. He definitely stood out towards like in the second half when, at that point it was it was a preseason squad out there. Oren Burks, I thought, had a good game as well. He had 7 tackles of his own, including a tackle for loss. He also had a quarterback hit and a sack. So, kind of showing some versatility there. He had 3 stops too. So, those guys, like if anyone, God forbid, if anyone just get hurt as far as the linebackers go, I think those guys could step in. Now, again, not saying they're going to be at that level. I'm just saying, like, it's good to know that your backups aren't, not all of them are so bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all known what Oren Burks is about. We saw him plenty throughout the season when Greenlaw would get nicked or whatever it might be. You see far less of DFF because that's Fred Warner's spot, right? And 54 doesn't really come off the field. It's just funny how like schemes and coaches just have types, right? Like whether it's DFF, Oren Burks, they play the same style and brand of football that Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner do. Obviously, Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw are just superior talents, right? That's not knocking what, Flanagan-Fowles and what Oren Burks are capable of, but they're just guys that run sideline to sideline and they can cover the field real fast, smart, instinctive guys, know how to fill gaps, fill holes. I mentioned Oren's filled in throughout the course of the year. So if he needs to again, I'm confident in his ability. Yes, it's going to be a drop-off skill-wise, but I think he can. Let's put it this way. I think on other teams where you are not backing up Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw, so across 31 other football teams, these guys have a chance to be part of, the starting rotation on other squads. It's just, they got all pros. I mean, I'm complimenting Dre Greenlaw here, but they have pro ball talent and all pro talent in front of them, and that's hard to circumvent. But both of them, I thought, played well, played admirably. Like they're not people I worry about when they're in these moments, right? In a week 18 game. Right. But whether it's Isaiah Oliver, whether it's DFF, whether it's Oren, this is audition tape, right? Like, do they become priority? Can you take your backup and can you flip it for something in the offseason? Anything, right? Like, can you take these undrafted guys and flip them for assets for younger, cheaper talent that probably, you got D Winters hanging in the whim, a couple other rookies back there. Like, it's just like rinse and repeat in terms of like a style that they go after. But they both played good ball. Like I don't think anybody really played poorly, Steph, right?
Right.
Like,
Just nothing that blew us away.
Yeah.
Which is okay. I mean, like, we should expect that in a meaningless Week 18 game. And I keep saying meaningless, but for the guys who were playing, who don't always get that opportunity, very much meaningful for them to be able to, showcase their talents. Good opportunity. Lori in the comments asks, is George Odom expected back? Well, I'm actually glad you asked. We did get an update from George Odom, as Matt Barrows tweeted out a few days ago last week. George Odom on IR with biceps tear said he might be able to return to practice soon and definitely thinks he can be ready to play at some point in the playoffs. He'll have to convince the team docs, of course. But that's a good sign. If he can come back, that would be huge, not just for depth, but also for special teams.
Yep.
This dude was a special teams ace. That special teams is like hurting out there, and it's not really something that's come out to hurt them in a game yet, but it's just not one of those things you want to find out or have it, be the detriment to one of your playoff games. So George Odom being back would be huge. Let's hope that, he could make a comeback at some point in the playoffs. Like I said, on IR right now, the 49ers would have to open up his 21-day practice window for him to even have an opportunity to come back. But, maybe that's something that happens in the next 2 weeks. Who knows?
Yeah, I wouldn't hold out hope on this. I would think that if we see them push the envelope on this subject, it would be another injury is suffered or something along those lines to speed back the timeline. But, he hasn't played ball in quite some time, and they now have guys getting reps. And, is the playoffs the time that you want somebody coming back? I mean, this isn't like Nick Bosa returning from injury, you know what I mean? Or Christian McCaffrey returning from injury. I'd love to have George Odom there, no doubt about it. I mean, for special teams alone, forget the safety depth, right? Like, just you want your captain of your special teams to be there. I just think it's that last one right there. He'll have to convince the team docs, right? I think that's the one that tells you that it's probably going to be far-fetched that he gets back in time. Maybe for a Super Bowl. Maybe
playing the Jimmy Garoppolo card.
Yeah.
Maybe he'll be back for the Super Bowl. Yeah, so we'll see on George Odom. I guess like we could be optimistic, but there's no guarantees on him coming back, of course, but hopefully we'll see. Now, I know there is a national championship, college football national championship, going to be airing here shortly, but I want to make sure, Weston, that we have a chance to put some players on notice if you need to. You did say a second ago that you think no one had a bad game. I think that could be challenged a bit.
You're probably right. I'm known to speak quickly and aggressively and then rethink afterwards. You can ask my wife on that. That being said, if I had to put somebody on notice, I'm not going to take the low hanging fruit. I'm gonna say Ronnie Bell. It's because I know he caught a touchdown pass, but I could argue that Sam Darnold just drilled that into his chest and he had no choice but to hang on when the ball hit him with how quick that came in. But the one thing that I don't expect from a Michigan product, right, and a guy that we were all so high on, he just seems lost. And I'm not even talking about the special teams games anymore, right? I'm talking about at wide receiver. You mentioned the miscommunication by Darnold. Half the time, you don't know whether it's the wide receiver or the quarterback that was wrong. But by the look of Kyle Shanahan on the sideline and talking to him, you knew right then and there number 10 was lost. And he's squandering an opportunity right now for himself. I know he's a rookie. I get all of that. But with Juwan, with this concussion prolonged, we know Ronnie's a physical guy. We know he's not afraid to block. We know he'll mix it up. But, like, you got to do the other things too. You got to be accountable on third down. You can't be running the wrong route. You can't not be on the same. You're not a superstar in this league yet where you get a pass on that. We see how quickly wide receivers end up in Kyle Shanahan's doghouse. Now, the good news is we've also seen another wide receiver emerge a few years later from Kyle Shanahan's doghouse, arguably playing at a pro ball level, but got snubbed, and Brandon Ayuk. So we've seen this before, and we've seen that they can rebound. But I think Ronnie Bell is lost right now, and I don't even think he's on a playoff roster. So long as Juwan comes back, I don't think he's part of the 46 that dress.
We've seen like two extremes, I think, of the outcome of the doghouse, and that it should be
Yeah.
trademarked, the Kyle Shanahan doghouse.
Yeah.
TM or
Pettis
trademarked.
and
Yeah,
yeah.
Dante Pettis, who was like that obviously didn't go well. Just never quite recovered from that from a confidence standpoint, it seems. And then Brandon Ayuk, who like it just seemed to make him better, right?
Yep.
So we don't know quite yet what side of the spectrum Ronnie Bell is going to fall, but I have hope that he's going to be one of the good ones, or just one of the. I think he'll grow from it. And I do think he's kind of at that point where, Kyle's probably looking at him like literally asking
Yep.
him, "What are you doing?" And it's just so comical at this point that we see every rookie wide receiver get to this. It's almost like an initiation.
I know.
And it's crazy because a lot of them do start out like looking solid and looking like they'll just blow right past it. And then by the end of the season, it's like they just fall into it somehow. Ronnie Bell just seems like he's at that point. But I think he'll turn it around. Luckily, assuming Juwan Jennings is going to be fine when the 49ers play in the divisional round, they're not going to need Ronnie Bell both as a receiver and a punt returner because that, as we know, was a failed experiment. But yeah, hopefully next year is a better year for Ronnie Bell.
Better luck next year, bud. That's where we're at right now.
Pretty much. I mean, and no shade to him. It's just
No, not at all.
That's just the nature of where he's at on the depth chart and his place right now in the doghouse.
Mm-hmm.
Now, rough day for former Michigan players. Probably not a great sign. Hopefully they can, win this championship here shortly. But Allen has Jake Moody on his list of players to put on notice. And I think for me, that would be my pick. It was either Ronnie Bell or Moody, both former Wolverines. So Jake Moody, for the fact that he missed a 38-yard field goal. And then after that, his only other opportunity to go out there and make a kick in this game with the extra point, he missed that too. So he didn't really have a chance to dust his shoulders off and get back to making one. He's going to have that hanging over his head for a couple of weeks, at least until the divisional round. So, look, I know a lot of people are very harsh on the subject of Jake Moody, and I don't want to quite go that far, but I also don't want to be a Jake Moody apologist at the same time. I'm simply putting him on notice.
Yeah,
like that's it. I see you. I've seen what you've done.
Yeah, knock that shit off, right?
Hope there's better days. All right, just hope.
Yeah, I mean, listen, being a kicker is a thankless opportunity, right? You are crucified when you don't, right? And everyone's like, good, that's your job when you do, right? Like, it's really thankless. I'm not going to lose faith in the kid. I mean, I am being an apologist for him in this regard, saying that, hey, he missed them both to the same spot. You know what I mean? It's not like where you see the overcorrection where you miss wide right and then all of a sudden you pull left. It's not ideal that any player on your team, let alone the kicker, gets the yips right before the playoffs. Now, that last possession, so well. I know, and he was doing great, right? We hadn't talked about him in the longest time, right? And I think that what hurt me the most was when Sam Darnold made that final fumble where it went off the dude's helmet, right, on that last possession. Is I had no disillusion that Sam Darnold was going to drive us down the field to win a game based on who else was out there with him.
Right.
But I did want to see them get close enough to put the ball on the turf one more time to let Moody get a swing of the leg, right? Hit or miss. I just wanted to see him swing it again. If you hit, great. Like, okay, we win the game. The bigger win is like, get this guy's head right before we're going. But the reality, all kickers miss, right? Nobody's ever perfect. It's just not the ideal timing is what's really panicking or making people freak out. But here's the good news, people. 49ers do score a lot of touchdowns, right? And a lot of these playoff teams that are left, outside of Detroit, who we haven't seen yet this year. We scored a lot of touchdowns against all of them, right? So I'm feeling like we're going to be okay. And the other news is like, there's no alternative. Kyle's not going to go get some guy who hasn't kicked all year off the street based on how he looks in practice. Like, Jake Moody's it, guys, no matter what. Robbie Gould is not coming back to the San Francisco 49ers. They're not even going to make the phone call. Like, this is who we got.
Yeah, all in all, like I do agree with the sentiment. Like he is going to be the guy, whether it's for better or worse. I mean, they don't really have a choice, and it doesn't seem like for Kyle, he's not overreacting to it. Obviously, acknowledge that it's not great when you miss, but I mean, he's been fine for them this season, so gonna keep riding him. And yeah, just hopefully in the playoffs he gets back to it. But like you said, the 49ers up to this point haven't had to depend on him to like hit a game winner or anything, or well, technically yes, but
yeah,
against the Browns. But you know, they've kind of cruised since then without needing his services quite as much. So hopefully that will be the case in the playoffs, but you could just never be too sure. But you know, we'll talk about it throughout the week. That's one of the topics we're gonna exhaust for the next two. So Weston, same time next week, right? We'll be here and we'll be talking about the 49ers next game, the divisional round, and of course a lot of time, a lot of football, not for 49ers leading up to that. So just relax from here on out. Let's have a good time and relax and watch Michigan and what is it? Is it Washington?
Michael Penix Jr. Let's go, Penix, baby.
Yeah, he's nice. He's nice. But I know a lot of us are rooting for Harbaugh, so let's go Wolverines. Let's see how that goes. But for now, have a good rest of your Monday, folks. Peace.